Chapter 7. Justin stretched out in the hammock and let the gentle rocking blow the troubles from his mind. How long had it been since he'd been able to do nothing and relax? He'd spent a month in Maui, which most people would have considered a vacation, but he couldn't remember walking the beach just for fun. No, he'd walked the beach looking for the best places to set up a camera or how the light affected a shot. He'd probably heard the gentle lapping of the waves behind him, but he certainly hadn't listened to them as he was now. Each ebb and flow seemed to have a story. The sands would be arranged just right, but then the water would wash ashore and sift them, change them, steal some back to its murky depths. He felt like the sand, and life was his ocean. When he'd first graduated from acting school, dreams filled his head. Dreams of making it big, of presenting visual stories that people would love. But then he'd met Carol. Suddenly, his dreams of making it big shifted. He still desired that, but even more, he needed a steady income to offer her some stability. That's when he met Peter. A reality dating show hadn't sounded terrible, and the audience appeared to be there. But then Carol had died, and his plans had changed again. He'd thrown himself completely into the show, needing it to do well in order to keep busy and avoid thinking about Carol. The show's popularity rose, and with it his fame, which was how he'd met Candy. He should have known with a name like that she wouldn't last, but he'd been lonely and foolish. However, she had been the wave that took a piece of him back to her murky depth. Now he felt lost, adrift in the sea of life without a compass. He hoped a new gig would give him focus, something to work toward, but he wasn't even sure of that. The only thing he was sure of was that he felt even more like the sand, like he was at the mercy of the waves, and at any moment they might arise and tear down his carefully built castles. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and a terrible feeling it held a wave washed over him. Peter's number on the screen came as no surprise, but that knowledge didn't warm the chill that was slowly spreading through his veins. "Hello, Justin, it's Peter. How is the stay going?" "Well, it's only day 2, but I'm working on relaxing. Lying in a hammock right now, listening to waves. However, they made a mistake when you booked, and I'm having to share the cottage with a woman." "A woman?" "Yeah, some romance writer. There are no other cottages available, and the contract says we have to wait 3 days before asking for a refund." "What is she like?" "The woman? Why on earth would Peter care what this woman was like?" "Yes, the woman. Who else?" Justin glanced back at the cottage. "She's infuriating. Always looks for the positive, believes in love, and prays before every meal. So not really my type. Not that I'm looking for romance." "Is she pretty?" Why was he pushing this? Hadn't Justin just told him she wasn't his type? I suppose. In truth, she was pretty, and Justin had noticed. Her raven hair made her skin appear creamy and soft, and her green eyes held just the hint of a challenge when she stared at him. "Why do you ask? I thought I was supposed to be relaxing and not thinking about some woman. At least that's what my boss told me." Justin made sure to put extra emphasis on the word boss. "Partners, Justin. We're in this together." Right, except that Justin didn't think he could send Peter on a mandatory pull-yourself-together retreat. There were clearly areas where Peter held the control, but that was an argument for another day. "All right, partner. What is this call really about? I don't believe you called just to check up on me." Peter sighed on the other end of the phone. "It's your image, Justin. Somehow they caught wind of what you told Carl, and the tabloids are blowing up about it. They're calling you a humbug, a Grinch, and my personal favorite, the male heiress." Justin scanned his memory of mythology, but the name was just out of reach. Who was heiress? The goddess of discord. Not a great comparison for a dating show host? It wasn't, but as Justin wasn't sure he wanted to be a dating show host any longer, he wasn't entirely sure it was as bad as Peter was making it out to be either. "Look, Peter, I know it sounds awful, but I think I might be done with Who Wants to Marry a Cowboy." "I think you're missing the point, Justin. This isn't about you looking bad on the show. This is affecting your brand. I've known you were thinking about leaving for a while, but right now you are damaged goods. No show is going to pick you up with this reputation." And there it was, the wave. He couldn't lose his brand. He was known as the charismatic host, and he needed that to secure another job. "What can I do?" "You need a rebrand, and you need it quickly. Look, I know you're on personal leave, but you need to find a way to show the world you haven't given up on love, that you aren't starting a one-man crusade to destroy it." "And how do you suggest I do that?" Marketing had not been Justin's strength in college, and he'd taken no classes about remaking your image. "I can really only think of one thing." Justin knew he wasn't going to like Peter's answer, but he asked anyway. "What's that?" "You need to get a girlfriend, and quickly." Justin nearly dropped the phone. "No, there has to be another way. I told you I was done dating after Candy." "I don't mean for love, Justin. I mean for show. You need to find a woman, preferably someone who screams romance, and you need to date her, in public. That will be the fastest way to fix your image. They can't say you hate love when you are in a relationship. Then, after you've been together a while, you guys can amicably separate. Have your jobs tear you apart or something, but no big breakups. Do you know of a woman like that?" A woman who screamed romance. He looked back at the cabin, picturing Ava sitting in the big chair. "Like a romance author. Now you're talking. Do you think she'll do it?" "I don't know. I just met her yesterday. How do I get her to agree?" "Give her something she wants. Make it a deal she can't refuse." A deal she couldn't refuse. He had no idea what that would even be. He supposed it was time to start warming up to her. Ava read back over her words with a sigh. They were fine, but that was it. They were just fine. There was no spark, no sizzle. She had thought coming here would help her be inspired, but though the words were coming, they weren't doing anything fantastic. There was no dancing on the page or jumping out at you. They just marched in single file and stood at attention. Maybe Genevieve would have some insight. Ava pulled out her cell phone and punched in the familiar number. "Hey, you! How's the writing going?" Jen had picked up before the phone rang twice in Ava's ear. She was fairly certain Genevieve had a psychic streak. She always seemed to know who was on the other end before she picked up the phone. "Not great. I mean, I wrote a lot, but the words aren't magical. They're just standing there, doing nothing. It's because you need to experience. I told you that life isn't perfect. You need to get out a little and date more." "I think it's more because the rental lady double-booked the cottage, and I'm having to share it with a living Ken doll." "What?" "Yeah, evidently there was some mix-up, and she booked me and this dating show host at the same time, and he is a piece of work. Doesn't believe in love, listens to heavy metal, hates God. You know, pretty much the opposite of me." "Is he cute?" Ava shook her head. "Why? I just told you he's the opposite of me." "I know, but hear me out, Ava. I forgot to remind you, but the annual romance gala is tomorrow night. It would be so much better for your image if you actually brought a date this year." Ava clapped her hand to her forehead. She had forgotten all about the gala, and she dreaded those events. Last year, she had attended without a date and received pitying looks all night. "Wait, are you saying I should take Justin? If you could handle him for a night, then I think it would be better than going alone again." The front door opened and Justin entered, looking a little like a cat who had eaten a canary. Ava wasn't even sure what it was. The glint in his eye, the smile that looked almost genuine, the air of excitement that floated by his head. But something had obviously happened while he was out. "I'll call you back." She pressed the end call button before Genevieve could say anything else. "Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt." "It's fine. It was just my editor. We talk nearly every day anyway." He bit his lip and nodded. "How's the writing going?" It wasn't the question he wanted to ask. She could tell by the way he shifted from one foot to the other. The shift was subtle, but she was a people watcher. "It's been better. I have words, but they aren't doing anything. Would you like some help? I'd be happy to read some. Ava's brow furrowed. Why was he being so nice? You. The man who hates romance. He shrugged. Maybe the fresh air is doing me good. I don't think so. I think there's something else, so why don't you tell me what you really want? Justin sighed and held up his finger in a give-me-a-minute gesture. He disappeared into the kitchen and then returned with one of the chairs, sitting it a little too close for Ava's comfort. What's the one thing you want most in this world? He reached for her hands, but then seemed to think better of it and folded them in his lap. You mean besides world peace? What was wrong with him? Had he found wild mushrooms? Someone selling special brownies? I'm serious. If you could have anything in the world, what would it be? Chocolate mousse from Paris. My friend went once and she said it was divine. Frustration creased his face and he sat back and ran a hand through his hair. Ava rolled her eyes. She didn't know what bug had bitten him, but he was wound tighter than Dick's hatband, as her mama used to say. Okay, fine. I guess I'd want to be a successful author. Have more people read my books, and maybe change their hearts. He leaned forward so fast she thought he might fly out of the chair, and this time his hands did find hers. She doubted he even noticed, though, because his eyes danced like a flickering candle flame, and his features were more animated than she'd thought possible from him. That's what I'm talking about. Now, what if I could make that happen? He had gone off the deep end. Ava gently removed her hands from his and leaned away from him. Are you a genie now, granting wishes? I don't see your lamp anywhere. Of course not. I only play when on TV. He flashed a teasing smile. This was a side she hadn't seen of him. But then she'd just met him yesterday. He probably had many sides she hadn't seen. But seriously, if I could make that happen, would you do me a favor? Now he was getting to the real question, though what favor she could do for him, she had no idea. I guess it depends on what the favor is. His shoulders rose and fell in an exaggerated gesture, as if gathering courage for whatever was about to come out of his mouth. Okay, hear me out. I know we just met, but I need you to be my girlfriend. If Ava had a drink in her mouth, she would have spat the contents all over him. Instead, a surprised chuckle escaped her mouth. Then it grew and became a full-fledged throaty laugh. He really had lost his mind. Only he wasn't laughing. Why wasn't he laughing? Her laugh died in her throat. You're serious, she said when she was able to speak again. I am. I just got a call from my boss, and it turns out that my lackluster feelings about love were discovered. Imagine that, Ava interrupted, but Justin continued as if he hadn't heard her. I'm all over the media, and not in a good way. It's important we turn my image around fast, and Peter's suggestion was a romance. Then Peter is crazier than you are. Ava stood and began pacing the room. And why me? You don't even know me. Don't you have some female friend you could ask? Surely you haven't soured all the women you've met. Justin's jaw clenched at her words, and he stood as well. I'm kind of a loner. I don't have a lot of close friends, much less girlfriends. Well, color me surprised. You mean that surly attitude of yours doesn't have women falling at your feet? That information did not surprise Ava in the least. Again, he let the comment slide. He must really need her help. Besides, it needs to be someone who screams romance, someone the public will love. Who better at romance than a romance author? Ava covered her face with her hands. This couldn't be happening. She had come here hoping to find quiet to finish her novel, not jump into a fake relationship with some stranger. I don't even know you. What do we even have in common? We both like the ocean, he said, gesturing out the window, and Code Red Mountain Dew. Ava threw her hands up in frustration. We cannot build a relationship on a carbonated beverage. Justin shook his head. A fake relationship, and we can build it on anything. We can make up some fantastical story if you'd like. Look, you help me turn my image around. In return, I help put you on the map. We'll get tons of press, some TV interviews. You'll be a household name and your books will fly off the shelves. Ava couldn't believe she was even considering this. But her books, getting exposure, was her dream. An exposure like this? It would be years before she could afford something like this. Plus, there was the gala. She would have a date. Of course, it would only be a good thing if he could pretend to enjoy romance. But he was a television host. He must have some acting skills. How long are we talking? I mean, I do hope to marry for love one day in the future, and that requires being free to date. A few weeks, maybe a month. We just need to attend events, score a few interviews, be seen together. Peter thinks that should be long enough to turn my image around and make it believable. And then we amicably separate. Claim our work pulled us apart or something like that. As long as there's no public fighting. When he put it that way, it did sound much more like a business arrangement than a relationship. And she would get things she needed in return. I need to think about it and call my editor back. Of course. The excited mania left Justin's face and he reverted back to his plasticky used car salesman look. Could she really pretend to be in a relationship with someone who reminded her of a used car salesman?